This talk is going to upset a lot of people because I'm going to reveal a very uncomfortable truth about the world, and that is it's often violent and cruel, and being non-violent just makes you a target. Let me explain with a short story about an incident that changed the course of my life and taught me the pathetic foolishness of nonviolence. 50 years ago, I was 13 years old, and one Saturday afternoon, my buddy and me decided we would go to the double rink skating arena on Jane Street just north of Highway 7. The skating arena was one of the few places teens could go because in those days there was nothing else. They had two skating rinks attached by a large indoor area with a cafe where you could buy a burger and fries. And we'd go there to watch the Junior League hockey games and scope out the girls' figure skating class in the other arena. Mostly we watched the figure skaters. In those days we would hitchhike. For the younger listeners, hitchhiking is where you would stand on the side of the road and hold your arm out with your thumb up, and people would stop their cars and give you a lift. Young people could travel across the country by hitchhiking, and years later I hitchhiked across Germany. Of course, this was Canada in the 70s, when crime was unheard of and no one locked their doors. There was a no cutting in line rule about hitchhiking that stated if there was somebody already hitchhiking on the road, you should go 20 yards further down the road. So my buddy and I were standing on the side of Jane Street when another guy comes up onto the road and stands about 30 yards in front of us, breaking the hitchhiking rule. Shortly thereafter, he got a ride in the back of a pickup truck, and as he passed us, he smirked and gave us the finger. That pissed me off. An hour later, we finally got a lift and arrived at the skating arena, and there, leaning against the wall, was the guy in the pickup truck who gave us the finger. I approached him and asked what his problem was. He gave me some smart aleck answer, and then I did something I never did before and have never done since. I punched him in the face. It wasn't a hard punch. I didn't draw blood, barely raised a welt, but it shocked him and he ran off. There is an irony in this, in that I was a nerd. I was president of the science club at school, a Boy Scout, and played in the school orchestra. It was completely out of character for me to throw a punch, and I think it was fate that prompted me to do so, as we will see. The next week I was hanging out at the drop-in center, run out of the rec room in one of the buildings in the housing project. And in walks the same guy that I had punched. It turned out the guy was friends with the local toughs, what passed as a street gang in those days. And he saw me and yelled out, "There, that's the guy that punched me." He and a half dozen guys surrounded me, and the leader of the gang questioned me. "Did you punch our friend?" he asked. "Yes, I did," I replied. And I then told him what happened and why I had no other choice but to smack the little prick in the head. I braced myself for a punch to the face. But to my surprise, they all looked at each other and asked the guy I punched if that was true, and he said yes. "Well then, you deserved a punch in the head," said the leader, and with that they left me alone. Back then, street gangs were like the mafia, or bikers. They still had a sense of honor. I later became friends with the toughs, and together we formed the first street gang. Throughout my middle school and high school years, I had the reputation as a street fighter. I wasn't. I threw one punch, but nevertheless I was someone everyone knew not to mess with. Now I want you to understand the privileges that came from having a reputation of someone that will punch you in the nose if you pissed him off enough. First, most of the other guys in school wanted to be friends with me. No one wanted to be my enemy. Second, the girls were much more interested and intrigued by me. Well, I was a bad boy now, and women love bad boys. Third, getting hired was much easier. The bosses all wanted a rugged young guy on the team. Shortly thereafter, I started training in martial arts, joined the Outward Bound Club, and learned wilderness survival and how to handle firearms, and thus began my journey to becoming an alpha male. And to this day, 50 years later, no one fucks with me. So I don't want to hear about nonviolence this and peaceful that, and let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That's not the way the real world works. Now, when I said no one fucks with me, that's not exactly true. There is one bully that fucks with me every day, and that is my government. Every day I wake up, the government is there to slap me in the face. As I work at my job, the government is there giving me an elbow to the ribs. When I come home at night, the government is there to give me a kick in the ass. And if I want to retire, the government is there to knock me to the ground and kick me in the head. If the government was a single person, that person would have been found floating face down in Lake Ontario 40 years ago. And now here we are. After 60 years of government indoctrination, we are an emasculated, weak, and fearful people, too afraid to raise a whimper as we are slaughtered. Make no mistake, we are in a war against our governments and the bankers that own them. They want you and me dead, and they already are killing us by the hundreds of thousands. The suicides, the drug overdoses, the cancer deaths, and the murders already account for more casualties each year than the entire death count from the Vietnam War. Our enemies care nothing about morality, fairness, or justice. They care nothing about your reasonable arguments, and they laugh at your peaceful protest. Understand, our enemies are creatures that kidnap your children, rape, torture, murder, and eat them. What, you think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. But we have to be nonviolent, peaceful, and never do anything to incite violence. Our enemies understand only one thing: a punch in the nose, or better yet, a firing squad. It's long past due for the sane and righteous people of the world to put down the phone, turn off the TV, and stand up and punch a few people in the nose. But don't take my word for it. Let me quote a Nobel Prize-winning author who already lived through what we will all be living through very shortly. And how we burned in the camps later, thinking, what would things have been like if every security operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive, and had to say goodbye to his family? Or if, during periods of mass arrests, as for example in Leningrad, when they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, paling with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and at every step on the staircase, but had understood they had nothing left to lose, and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall in ambush of a half-dozen people with axes, hammers, pokers, or whatever else was at hand. After all, you knew ahead of time that those blue caps were out at night for no good purpose, and you could be sure ahead of time that you'd be cracking the skull of a cutthroat. From Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago. You have only two options: fight on your feet or serve on your knees. If you think there is a third option, you're wrong. Your choice, and you better make it soon.